Hello and welcome to yet another podcast of The Rings. I'm Jessica Lynn, Verdi, and in case it isn't clear, the whole conceit of this podcast is that I don't know very much, which is why I've enlisted the help of one Sir Alexander Mitchell, who is my co-host. Say
Hello.
hi, Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Alex. You did good. Alex,
Yes.
you know a lot about things I don't know about.
Yeah, I would say there is a disparity between our knowledge of this topic.
At least this topic.
Yes, probably.
And then I
only
might
this
know
topic.
more about another topic that you don't know about.
I think that's 100%.
Likely.
Yeah.
And I've never been untransparent, intransparent, less transparent about the fact that I don't know very much about this.
Sure.
Great. Just wanted to get that out there. It's the whole point of the podcast. Anyway.
It's a pretty good premise.
Whatever. Last 2 weeks, we've spent time deep diving into a couple characters that people may already be familiar with when it comes to Middle Earth, J.R.R. Tolkien lore, and Lord of the Rings. And what we're doing here for you on this podcast is giving you the runner-up course that you might want / need before we jump into the new Amazon Prime series, Rings of Power.
If you're a fan of the deep knowledge stuff, it's maybe a refresher. And if you've only seen the movies or only read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, you might be learning stuff you never knew about.
And here I am to be just like you, the listener, who may not know as much as you might want to, and I'm going to ask all the questions you have. Yet again, that's the whole point of this podcast. This is recording days after Comic-Con this weekend. I haven't even seen the majority of the information released about this show. I'm excited. And I think what Alex and I have decided is we'll look through some of that information and look at the trailer together, and we will add that as a bonus episode for Patreon.
Sweet bonus episode. The trailer, I'm not going to get into it too much, but there's a lot going on, folks. If you haven't seen the Comic-Con or the trailer that was released at Comic-Con, please watch it and go listen to that bonus episode.
Watch it with us. We're going to watch it. And I'll react to it in real time. Why not?
Well, sure. Yeah, watch it with us, but also watch it on your own.
I see. All right, I forget it. We're already arguing. Okay, I'm just kidding.
It's just so good. I want everyone to see it.
I hear you. I'm so glad that you are excited, because we've even heard from a couple asshats out there who are like, no one's excited that likes this show, like that likes Lord of the Rings.
Online, people are saying that?
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
That's crazy.
You're of the contingency that this actually is probably going to be pretty good.
I'm hopeful. From what I've seen, it has me excited. I'll briefly cover what I think. I think that, yes, there are changes to the visual language when you compare it to Peter Jackson's original trilogy, and I think that rubs people the wrong way, i.e., Elrond and Celebrimbor and some of the elves, they have short hair. There's a lot of people upset about that. Elves, these don't look like elves, and it's...
What?
I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, I'm open to being corrected, which I'll get to corrections in a second. I don't think Tolkien ever mentions the length of elven hair typically in elven culture. I don't think that's the thing. Also, think about this, right? A counterpoint. We're talking about thousands of years, right?
Uh-huh.
So we have, we talked in the Galadriel episode, our very first episode of the history of the elves, the first age into the second age, right? These are thousands of years. Think about how quickly fashions change in our world. Now, Granted, the elven time scale, they're going to change more slowly, but maybe the second age, the thing that was in vogue was elves have short hair now.
They're
and
short
then
hair
by the
people.
time we see Elrond, thousands of years later, he's like, no, this is like the current elven fashion trend is like long hair.
What
totally
if they can't
possible.
grow hair until they're over 1,000 years old? Like
Maybe.
long hair. Maybe it's the length
a sign
of their life.
Yeah. I don't.
But if I know anything from immortal beings, and if what we do in the shadows has taught me anything, the tastes don't change very much.
Sometimes, yeah, you get set in your ways, right? And you just you find the fashion you like. I watched this. This is a total side tangent, but I watched this interesting video by YouTuber Vsauce, and talks about why when we look at pictures of people who are like the same age as us, but in the 80s, for example, they still look old.
Oh,
And a lot of it just has to do with fashion and style, because we tend to associate those fashions with old people, because a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, they reach a certain point in their lives and they go, this is my look. And that becomes dated in time. And then they continue to dress like that.
Kids from the 80s literally look 50 sitting in those seats. They really do. You're telling me you're going to see someone from the 2000s in tank top, like crop tops and apple jeans, and you're going to say, yeah, that looks like a 40-year-old person?
Well, no, because we are of that age, so they don't look old to us. But to someone now who's 15, 16, 17, 18, they do.
All right, we'll do this test.
Because they associate those trends. That's all I'm saying. So maybe the elves of the first age, the elves who are born in the second and third age, they go, look at these geezers with their short hair. Who wears short hair anymore? They're so old. They probably saw the two trees.
They probably saw the two trees.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah. I love that. I actually felt like a badass over the Comic-Con weekend, because I was able to talk about the first stage with some knowledge. I had people at the edge of my fingertips because I was so excited and interested in talking about this. So far, you've already helped me sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's all I can hope for.
Well, and this week it's exciting. We're jumping into a different race altogether, aren't we?
Before we drop into this,
how come I always do this? Every time I'm going to try to actually naturally segue, you're like, no, Jessica.
Because I need to mention something. It's been weighing.
Oh,
it's been weighing on me.
We haven't had to do corrections yet.
New segment on the pod. Correction corner. Please mail. Send your letters to 6969 Bagshot Row. No, so on last week's episode, I'm sure there's more corrections, so actually is there somewhere?
Yeah, Jessica Verdi business at gmail.com.
Okay. There you go. Send your corrections there. Maybe we can set up an email. I'll set up an email.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
I will. We'll have that in the show notes. But
sure we will.
If you find any other corrections, but I mentioned we were talking about Baron and Luthien, because that was very important. And I multiple times referred to Elwing as their daughter. She's not. She's their granddaughter. She is the daughter of Dior, their son. So I was wrong.
So actually, this is a podcast about two people that don't know anything.
I don't know anything about Lord of the Rings. I thought Elwing was their daughter instead of their granddaughter.
You caught that really quickly after like recording it. You're like, oh God.
They're gonna come for me.
Yeah, no, but like no one corrected you. You caught it yourself.
It invalidates everything I said in that whole episode because I got that one thing wrong. That's just how it is.
That is how it is.
Yeah, those are the rules.
That's the rules. Can we safely segue now?
Yes.
Okay. Alex, who are we talking about today?
We are talking about the Dwarves and the Durins.
The Durins.
So,
the Durins. Let me make an educated guess here.
Okay, go for it.
Is Durin related to Thorin?
Yes.
And Thorin is the daddy of and my ex.
No, he's not the daddy.
He's a granddaddy?
No. So, okay, let me try and do this off the top of my dome because the family tree is
insane.
Thorin, his cousin is Glowin. I believe they're cousins. Glowin is one of the members of the company, of Thorin's company in The Hobbit.
Right.
So for those who don't know, maybe you don't know The Hobbit, Thorin was the prince who went on the quest to retake Erebor, that Bilbo was enlisted by Gandalf to go accompany them on, to retake the Lonely Mountain, defeat Smaug.
Smog is really his name.
Smog, if you're from the Midwest.
Can you see? I can't see because there's a lot of smog out there.
Smog and Sauron.
And Tolkien.
As someone from the Midwest, training myself to say some of these names somewhat properly was...
all I said was Smog and Tolkien. Why would I have said anything else?
And then also, for years, I was like, yeah, Sauron? Oh, yeah, the Dark Lord Sauron? There's another great podcast, Ringheads, that it's Bill Corbett, who's like one of the guys from Mystery Science Theater, and he's like a Midwest guy, and he always says Sauron, and it tickles me so much.
Oh, that's delightful.
It tickles me so much to hear him say the name like that. So Thorin and Glowin are cousins. Glowin was one of the dwarves in the company. Glowin is Gimli's father.
Gotcha. Ha-cha-cha.
So
okay.
Gimli and Thorin are cousins.
And who was the dwarf that went to go reclaim the area where the Balrog was? The Balrog.
Balin.
And Balin is related to another member?
They're also cousins, I believe. I don't know the exact...
But was Balin in the party in a Hobbit?
Yes.
The Hobbit? Okay. Balin was... So we know Balin, so we should be sad that Balin's dead, essentially.
Yes. That's like one of those little sort of connections to...
I see.
The Hobbit, right? And it's interesting, too, because when you read through Lord of the Rings and you're at the Council of Elrond, and you have this name come up, you're like, oh, Glowin's here. And you don't know, like now we know, because Lord of the Rings, I think people know a little bit more. We think of Gimli, but a reader back then would have seen Glowin, and if they were in the know, they would have been like, oh, cool, like Glowin. And it is interesting because you have those two kind of relations where, Frodo is Bilbo's cousin.
Nephew.
Or nephew, yeah. Thank you. Correction there. We got to have one every episode. But you have that familial relationship to the original quest in The Hobbit. And then you have like Gimli and Glowin, who we don't know Gimli yet, but we know Glowin.
He's just but a babe.
Yeah. Well, I guess in dwarf terms, I don't know how old he is, but probably, yeah, pretty young for a dwarf. So it's interesting we have those two familial connections. So Durin is the ancestor to all of them. That's like the royal line.
Gotcha.
For the Longbeards, which is, there's different clans of dwarves, which we'll get into. So we're talking about Durin. I want to do a similar thing to what we did with Galadriel. Let's go back to the beginning. Where do dwarves come from?
That's what I want to know so bad.
I know you were excited to learn about this.
Who popped out the first dwarf?
So,
did they come from the ground? Were they formed from dirt?
What's your theory before I tell you?
I think stalactites fell down in caves into magical pools.
Ooh.
And made little people.
I like that. It's just, how did they come up? Magic pools. Yeah, yeah, magic pools. The elves awoke by magic water. Magic pools. That's the answer. I think I'm right. A magic pool. Well, not magic, but a pool does play an important part in the tale. Not in their origin, but later on.
All right. See, I'm foreseeing things.
So here is the origin of the dwarves. So the Valar, the sort of gods of Arda, right, or demigods, if you want to get specific, they were aware of the coming of the children of Iluvatar, right? The children of Iluvatar being the elves first, and then the men second, right? And there was one Valar in particular, Aule, and he was sort of the Valar concerned with like smithing and crafting things and materials.
I see where this is heading.
So he was a bit impatient. He was like a kid.
Aule?
Aule. A-U-L-E. E with a little umlaut
Aule.
thing. Aule. I think that's how you say it.
Sure. Sauron.
Sauron. The bears. So he was impatient. He was like a kid the night before Christmas. Couldn't wait to open his gifts. Because they knew the children were coming, but they didn't know when exactly, and they weren't arrived yet. So he went off on his own and fashioned the dwarves. He created his own.
He made them. I told you, from dirt.
Yeah, stalagmites. Yeah, maybe that was used in their creation. Who knows?
Stalactites are different than stalagmites, my friend.
Tights are the ceiling.
Correct.
Which fell in the pools.
Said exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're stalagmites instead.
Yeah, and he just sort of like shaped
Hammered
them like a pottery wheel or something.
No, he chiseled them.
Chiseled them. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God, this is making so much sense now.
It all is coming together. Yeah. And that's so they're his children. But the thing about the elves and men is that they were created by the one, Eru. And so he was able to give them what's called the flame of Iluvatar, which is basically like life, a soul in essence. So Aule made these dwarves. He made, well, we'll get to how many he made because there's conflicting things. But like there's a lot with the dwarves. There's a lot of kind of like in this account versus this account, it says this. So he makes them and they can't function on their own unless he's thinking and concentrating and giving them,
Little
basically
tasks.
puppeteering them. Yeah, like they just kind of are inert.
Oh, he doesn't little babies.
Yeah, he doesn't have the ability to give them, their own free will essentially and souls. So he does this, and then Eru immediately comes in. And he's like, "Dude, what are you doing? God. I'm the one who is able to make life. I told you this. You're not supposed to do this. This is beyond your purview. Look, they're inanimate.
Cute.
They can't even. Yeah, they're cute, and that's why the dwarves look like they do because they knew the children were coming, but they didn't know exactly what they looked like. They didn't know their forms. So this was kind of Aule's like, I wonder what the children of Iluvatar are going to look like. Something like this. So that's why they look the way they do, is because Aule didn't have an exact, plan. This is exactly what men and elves are going to look like. So dwarves look a little different. But they're very hardy, right? Because that's kind of Aule's interpretation.
Well, and also if he is a smithy, it would make sense that he's making a hardy people.
Yeah, they take
based off of
him.
his interest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Eru comes and he says, "What are you doing?" And Aule immediately reflects and is like, "You know what, Eru, you're right. I was out of line," and goes to, with sadness, destroy his creations. And this is it's very similar to like kind of the story of Abraham.
Oh,
like
yeah,
in the Bible,
yes.
where God comes to him and is like, sacrifice your children to me. But then it's like a test of faith, and God intervenes. And so that's what happens here. Eru sees that Aule had good intentions and takes pity on him and his creations.
Yeah.
And so as he's about to strike them down, he instills the dwarves with their own life, and they beg for mercy. And then Eru goes, "Oh, look, these are now creations with their own will." And so he allows them to live. But
it's horrible. No wonder they have daddy issues.
Right? They're a little bit kind of, he literally calls them his adopted children. Because he takes them and says, "Well, I'm going to let them be, but my plan is still going to be the plan. So that means the elves are going to awaken first." And so this happened before the elves had awakened. So he takes the dwarves and he scatters them at various places in Middle-earth, in mountains, basically. That's why the dwarves, they like wake up. When they wake up in mountains. That's why they kind of revere them. And is like, they're going to sleep until the time for them to wake up. And he calls them his adopted children.
So do they remember being awoken and then going back to sleep?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because that's pretty effed up.
I don't know if they would remember that. I don't think it ever says. Yeah, did he wipe their memory?
So The MIB'd him.
Yeah,
Like,
they just.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just weird.
So and in the Silmarillion, it says there are 7 fathers of dwarves. Now, I thought about this and I did some research, and I was like, we'll get to dwarf women because that's a whole thing, especially with this new show. But I was like, how do they? Because in the text of the Silmarillion, it's like there's just 7 fathers, and then they go and populate with dwarves, and it's like, how does that work?
They squirt into the dirt, and then the little seedlings sprout up like their daddy did.
See, that if you were talking to men or men in Middle Earth, they would believe that, because it does say in the appendices that some people believe dwarves spring from stone. But I did some research, and in another text that Christopher just chose not to use because he considered it less complete, another text his father wrote, Tolkien does mention that Aule created 6 mothers of the dwarves, but he omitted that from.
Sounds like some patriarchy BS to me.
It's weird. This is the thing, people.
Where's the appendices? Where's the note? Where's the?
Well, there are many books published after the Silmarillion that have different unpublished or previously unpublished writings that are incomplete from Tolkien that Christopher put out over the years. One of them we'll talk about is the War of the Jewels, which has some stuff on the dwarves, where he goes through the Silmarillion. There's like the Morgoth's Ring and the War of the Jewels. Unfinished Tales is a big one. That have some of these other versions that were never published. And so I don't remember which book it's in, but it's one of these books where one of the versions of this legend had the Mothers of the Dwarves. Didn't make it into the published Silmarillion, but later was published. And so, yeah, we're going to assume that happened, I think, because that makes sense. But depending on which text you read, there were no dwarf mothers. And I don't know, where did dwarf women come from?
They took a rib and buried it.
Yeah.
And then mated with it. Yeah. That makes sense to me.
Totally. Yeah. So one of these fathers of the dwarves, though, is Durin.
Durin 1. Durin 1.
Yes.
Durin. How do you spell Durin?
Durin.
Durin.
And
Aule.
And Durin.
Durin.
Is that what, Icelandic? Durin.
It's a new song by Bjork. Durin.
Yeah, how does the chorus of that one go?
She just throws a bunch of quarters into the washing machine. Durin. Durin.
Yeah. I really like that one for use of found instruments in the washing machine. That's pretty good.
I actually did not make up that joke. I believe that came from the Celebrity Jeopardy episode where one of the actors was playing
Bjork
in the goose outfit.
Oh my God.
Pretty sure.
That's amazing. Celebrity Jeopardy. So good. Why did they never have Christopher Tolkien?
I'm not surprised they didn't. I wouldn't be able to pick him out of a crowd, alone.
He's a celebrity to me.
Sure. Okay. Moving right along.
So that's my goal, is for you to be like, please tell me more. Please say more about this deep lore stuff.
About Christopher Tolkien? Sure.
No, about please continue. Tell me more about the origin of the dwarves.
I see. You're doing well so far then. By boring me about other things.
Exactly. That's my plan is working. So Durin is the first dwarf made. He's the father. He gets buried at Mount Gundabad, which, if you think of the Misty Mountains, right, that mountain range that runs north-south, and then the Gray Mountains is the mountain range that runs east-west along the top of the north side of the map. Gundabad is basically where those meet. So the very north of, pretty much the very north of the Misty Mountains. So he awakens there after the elves wake up, and he wanders south along the Misty Mountains and eventually comes upon, I had to write this down. Keled Zaram, These dwarf names are
Kaledzaram.
Kaledzaram. I think I'm saying that right. Which is this lake.
Pool.
Exactly. Magic pools. And he just kind of looks out over it and sees reflected in the water stars that seem to him to form the shape of like a crown. And he takes this as a sign and says, all right, I'm where I need to be. And he comes across this cave network just on the, right across from this lake in the Misty Mountains, and founds the city of Khazad Dûm, a.k.a., as it later becomes known, Moria. So this is the home of the dwarves.
Khazad Dûm.
Yes, the halls of Khazad Dûm.
Wait.
And yeah, so this is, yes?
Doom?
No, Dum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know what Khazad Dûm means?
Dwarf home,
House?
I think.
Kaza?
I don't know what Doom is, but Khazad is like dwarf. Dwarf something. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not good on the translations. There are plenty of experts on the linguistics.
Oh, be sure to
I am not one
do
of
a
them.
podcast with them instead next time.
Please get them in. I'd love to talk to them. Dwarf something. I don't know. Look it up, folks. Write in, send us letters, and let us know. So he first he erects Durin's stone at the site where he saw this kind of vision, if you want to call it that, and then finds this cave network, founds the city of Khazad Dûm, which is sort of kind of not like a holy site to the dwarves, but it's when we see Gimli like get there when they're arriving in Fellowship of the Ring, he's very like emotional and kind of reverent because he's only seen it once. But dwarves revere this place; it's kind of like a holy city to them. Gundabad, where like Durin awoke, would be kind of, if they were to go there, that'd be like taking a pilgrimage to not necessarily like a holy city, but like a very important religious site for them. So that's the
like
origin.
They're going to Bethlehem, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Where Jesus was born, and then going to Jerusalem or something might be akin to Khazad Dûm. I don't know. So that is the origin of Durin. Now, what's interesting about the religious beliefs of the dwarves, and this is where we get into more of, depending on what text you read and where you're getting information, you're going to come to different conclusions. So the dwarves believe that Durin, they call him Durin the Deathless, lived a long time, and when he died, there was a belief that he was reincarnated. So when he died, there was someone born that looked and acted like Durin, and so they went, "You're Durin the Second, and you become our leader." Now, I don't know for sure. I believe they're all like heirs. So bloodline is important, but they also believe that it's kind of a reincarnation thing. Which is when we get to talking about the show, based on what we've seen, we're having Durin the Third and Durin the Fourth living at the same time. So it's interesting how if they're just gonna ignore that aspect entirely or what. But
I can understand why they would, though. It's kind of convoluted at a certain point. Like, are we talking about Buddhism, folks, or not?
I mean, yeah, to a certain extent, they believe that it's reincarnation. Now it makes sense when they're, we've talked about how they're condensing the timeline significantly. Right. So, but I also, in the most recently released book, I think it was the last one Christopher Tolkien worked on, or I don't even know if he worked on it. But anyway, The Nature of Middle Earth talks a lot about the kind of cosmology and life cycles and culture of the different peoples of Middle Earth, the elves and men and dwarves. And in that text, Tolkien writes about how it was actually not reincarnation, but the dwarves would, when the body died of Durin specifically, they would just like lay it to rest and let it recuperate, I guess, somehow. And then the spirit would return to that body. So it actually is just the same body. So that's if you go by that text.
Wild.
And then there's other, there's also the possibility that this is just the dwarf's belief and it's not true. Because they also believe that their spirits go with Aule to a special place in Valinor in the Halls of Mandos that's like separate from the elves, because the elves' spirits go to the Halls of Mandos, and so they believe that kind of Aule is keeping them in their own little wing, kind of off to the side. And then they'll be reincarnated later for the final battle, which is a whole thing. That's kind of the apocalyptic type beliefs. So there's all sorts of murky waters with exactly what is the lineage. Is it reincarnation? Is it just they believe it's reincarnation, but it's just hereditary, passed down? Who knows? It all depends on what you believe and which text you're looking at. So there's a lot of murkiness in this. But we have the line of Durin continuing. At the end of the First Age, remember we talked about the Wars of Beleriand?
Remind me.
So there was a whole section of Middle Earth that was sundered and destroyed and sank beneath the ocean. So pretty much the furthest east extent of that was this region called the Blue Mountains, and two of the major dwarf settlements were there, Belagost and Nogrod. So two of the
died?
Two of the dwarf fathers were there, and they didn't all die. They did fight in.
I was going to say they had something to do or had nothing to do.
Yeah, no, they were very much heavily involved in the Wars of Beleriand against Morgoth, and the whole our guy Cary Elwes, right, the Elf King. Remember, he got killed by a bunch of dwarves. Those were dwarves from Nogrod, who wanted the Naglamir with the Silmaril in it. So at the end of the First Age, after the sinking of Beleriand and the destruction of Thangordrim and all of that, their turf was kind of messed up, and so the majority of them, shortly after, migrated and went to Khazad-dûm. And so Khazad-dûm became like the place, because they brought with them all of their, the knowledge from the elves that they had interacted with, and the riches in their caverns. And so they basically all of that culture and wealth got concentrated in Khazad-dûm, where Durin was leading. So that was the place. Then later on in the Second Age, then there's a lot of time. The dwarves there had some like relationships with the humans, with trade and stuff, and they were pretty friendly with the men of Middle Earth. And then we get to the Second Age, where during the second and the third, mostly during the third at this time, I believe. I don't know exactly the dates of rule, but in the 1500s is when the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and the elves of Eregion start becoming friends. So Eregion...
So also, you're saying, too, that the dwarves' life expectancy is pretty long as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not as long as elves, obviously, but hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah.
Than men. And I'm sure people know that, and I think I even knew that, but just clarifying. So, like, if you're at Durin the Third and it's 1,500 years later, that's a long-ass time.
Yes. Yeah. I think, they can maybe live up to 1,000 years. I'd have to check the exact dates. I don't know for sure. But they live a long time, especially if you're of Durin's line, because he's They called him Durin the Deathless for a reason. You know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they strike up a friendship with the elves of Eregion. And Eregion is basically their front door, right?
Right.
They're in the Misty Mountains, and Eregion is just to the west in that area. So they're kind of on their doorstep. So Celebrimbor is ruling Eregion at the time, and they strike up a friendship, start kind of trading, knowledge of magic and craftsmanship, and kind of repairing some of the damage that was done to the elves and dwarves relationship after the First Age, because some of the dwarves in Nogrod literally killed
a king,
one of the original leaders, not just like a king. They killed Thingol.
Yeah,
one of the OG like fathers of the elves, or not fathers of the elves, but one of the leaders of the elven clans. Not good, not a good look. So this is kind of patching up some of that relationship. And I would imagine it's, because the Longbeards, Durin's people, are called the Longbeards. They're not the ones who did it, but some of those refugees from Nogrod were there. So I'm imagining like there was maybe some dwarves there that they're like, oh, I remember you. Like we fought against you. But it's not like all of them. So, and so Celebrimbor, with the help of a dwarf called Narvi, builds the doors of Durin, which you'll remember from Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah, Melon, right? Those are the same doors. So those are built during this time. That's why you had, elvish writing on a dwarven entrance to a dwarven city, right? And the Ithilien, the moon letters and stuff. That was like elvish magic. We see the same writing on the map in The Hobbit, right? It's like the same thing, the moon letters. So I'm guessing, this is a bit of a side note here, but I'm guessing we're going to see them, because Narvi's like such a side character. He's mentioned a couple times, and really only in the context of he was friends with Celebrimbor and helped build these doors. I'm guessing they're kind of going to roll that role into like Durin the Fourth. Because without getting too deep into it, it kind of looks like Durin the Third in the trailer that we see. He's not too keen on the elves. But Durin the Fourth maybe is a little bit more. So I think they might roll in kind of that character of Narvi into Durin the Fourth and make him tight with Celebrimbor. We'll see what they end up doing, but that would be my guess. And then, speaking of Celebrimbor, he also gifts Durin the Third. Well, according to what text there's a lot of according to which thing you read in relationship with the dwarves, because Tolkien didn't write extensively about them in published works. Some texts say that Celebrimbor gifted Durin the Third one of the dwarven rings of power, and that he held on to this ring. Other texts would lead you to believe that Sauron, in the war against the elves, when he tortured and tortured and killed Celebrimbor.
What?
And, I know, right? R.I.P. And was revealed the locations of the 7 and the 9 rings, that Sauron then retook them, and then Sauron was the one who gave it to Durin the Third. So it depends on what you read. I believe in the Lord of the Rings appendices, it says that basically the dwarves hold the belief that, and again, Tolkien is interesting how he couches this language. He doesn't just say like this happened, but he says, according to the dwarves, this is what they think. And also go ahead.
No, you.
Okay. Also keeping in mind that in the world of this book, this is a text written in world by, Bilbo and Frodo, and then Sam adding stuff later on, and then it being translated by Finnegill, the king's writer, and then, so like that's also a layer of it. Like, can we trust this information 100%? This is canonical. Well, there's some lens.
They're giving themselves wiggle room, or Tolkien's giving himself wiggle room. I'd be curious to understand, and perhaps this is something you'll either talk about when we get to Sauron, or this is supplemental, but why did he want to know where all the rings were if he created the one ring to rule them in the first place and should have known where all the rings are? And I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Well, I will briefly give an answer. He had a hand in making all the rings with Celebrimbor.
Except for the elves.
Except for the elven rings, yes. But he did not possess the rings. The only ring he possessed was the One Ring.
Yeah, but shouldn't have it united all of the rings? Isn't that the whole point?
Well, so his whole point in his plan was, I'm going to have these rings be made, and then they're going to be distributed amongst the powerful, and then they don't know I have the one, and then when they are using these rings, I'm going to use mine to ensnare them to my will. So he wanted the rings in the possession of
Yeah, but then when they were in possession of this other...
They weren't all given out because the elves realized what he was doing before they gave out all these rings.
I see. Okay, well, that was my question.
Yeah. So then Sauron's MO was like, well, I got to give out these rings. I got to take them.
Got it. I see it now. It's all coming back.
So that's why it's this kind of thing, depending on which source you're looking at. Maybe Celebrimbor, before Sauron took the Dwarven rings, gave Durin III a dwarf ring in a sign of friendship. According to the dwarves, he did. But then also there's other things that could support. No, that didn't happen, and Sauron was the one who gave Durin the ring. Either way, Durin the Third had a ring.
All right.
He had one of their rings. That's the main takeaway here. All right, and then we come to a little bit later in the Second Age, during the war of the elves and Sauron, where they're fighting each other. He's revealed himself. Durin sends a force of dwarves to aid in the defense of Rhegion. Durin the Third, this is at the time he's ruling. And if you'll remember when we talked about Elrond also came to the aid of Rhegion with a force of elves from Lindon. And it was Durin's aid, sort of the elves and the dwarves working together, that allowed Elrond to escape with some of these refugees of the Noldor to go to Imladris, Rivendell. So they kind of bought them some time. They helped out in that fight. And if it weren't for that, the elves probably would not have made it out and been able to establish Rivendell.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of resentment for someone that helped them. Not uncommon when you talk about welfare resentment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean...
That's a big leap.
The relationship... The relationship of the elves and the dwarves is an interesting one. They didn't always hate each other, and there were moments where they worked together. I mean, when there's a common enemy like that, it's clear what you need to do. But still, then when you get to those peace times, you go back and go, but they did this.
I don't like them that much.
Yeah, remember when they betrayed us and killed one of our kings?
Mm-hmm.
And stole or attempted to steal one of our most priceless gems and artifacts that defines our people. That's that nice. We've literally killed our own blood over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And the dwarves are stubborn. You know, the dwarves are stubborn, and the elves are long-lived, so they're not quick to forgive
or change their hairstyles.
No, that takes. You know how long it takes to grow out elven hair from?
That's my point exactly.
Bob? It's not that they're quick to.
I'm not going to Samson and Delilah them.
No, that's thousands of years.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you get it.
I understand. So Durin the Third, instrumental in helping Elrond there and helping the foundation of Rivendell. And that's basic. And then we'll get to
what is Durin the Fourth? Well, so I guess if that's basically it. Is what my real question is: what do you think we're going to see the Durins do? The dwarfins do? The dwarf twins, the Durin twins.
That'd be interesting. What if there were twins where it's like, which one's the real reincarnation?
Ooh.
Who knows?
I think we have a fanfic to write. Or a /fic.
I don't endorse this.
Yes, you
do. Well, based on what we've seen, so Durin the Fourth, as far as what we know from the text, we don't know anything. We don't really know much about Durin the Second. There's kind of this whole gap. We don't know much about Durin the Fourth. There's just not much written about what they do. Durin the Third, I think know the most about with his relationship with Celebrimbor and the Elves of Eregion and his involvement in the War of the Elves and Sauron and the Second Age. So that's why I think it's interesting that they're bringing it. They're sort of folding in Durin the Fourth as this prince character. Based on what we've seen, I think we're going to get a dynamic of Durin the Third as the king, being kind of stodgy and remembering the old grudges of the past of the his people in the First Age, stuff from the wars of Beleriand, and just being not necessarily keen on the elves. And I'm assuming they're going to sort of not pay attention to the fact that they also had like good relationships with the men, like good trade relationships and such. Again, that's like mentioned in one, not even a Silmarillion text. I think it's like the Peoples of Middle Earth where they talk about that. So they're not going to talk about that. They're going to just, I think, have him be distrustful of men, distrustful of elves, and be more isolationists. And why do we want to work with them? And you're going to have then the next generation of Durin the Fourth being more open to that and having maybe more of a friendship with Celebrimbor and Elrond.
I see.
We see Elrond sort of going on as an emissary, in Lindon, into Khazad-dûm. We see that in one of the trailers. So I think him and Durin are going to strike up a friendship. Him and Durin and Celebrimbor are going to maybe strike up a friendship. And I think that's the dynamic we're going to see, is like Durin being the one to make these connections, or Durin the Fourth, rather. I keep saying Durin.
I don't blame you, though.
They're just all Durin. Durin the Fourth is going to be the one who is more making this connection, whereas in the source material, it's Durin the Third.
Durin squared, right? No, is that two? Durin to the third power, Durin to the fourth power, that one.
Yes, Durin to the fourth.
I was thinking squared because there are 4 corners on a square. I was like, oh, that's got to be it.
There you go.
But I was wrong.
It makes sense to me.
It shouldn't.
Durin times Durin equals Durin the Fourth.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what we're going to see from the show. The other side note.
Oh.
Dwarven women.
Gotcha.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because this has set the internet on fire.
On fire.
Set it on fire. Flames on the side of my face, burning off my existent or non-existent beard, depending on who you talk to. I want to present the case for both. So, for those who don't know, one of the main criticisms that people have come out with, these people who just want to criticize before they've seen anything, how could dwarf women not have beards? Do you not respect the text? And I do want to read from the source material in the appendices. So they have the rights to the appendices.
Aha.
And and it's interesting because I actually didn't know this until I reread it. But one of the dwarven princess we see, Dis, the name actually comes from the text. It's a different character, but so in Appendix A from Durin's Folk, it says Dis was the daughter of Thrain II. So different character, but they're using the same name, which is cool. That's I think the only dwarf woman name we get ever.
Dis is a cool name.
Yeah, it is. It's a very pretty name. She is the only dwarf woman named in these histories. It was said by Gimli that there are a few dwarf women, probably no more than a third of the whole people. They seldom walk abroad except at great need. They are in voice and appearance, and in garb if they must go on a journey, so like to the dwarf men that the eyes and ears of other peoples cannot tell them apart. This has given rise to the foolish opinion among men that there are no dwarf women, and that the dwarves grow out of stone. So from that text, it doesn't say they have beards. It just says that they're so like in appearance and the way they dress when they're going abroad that they're mistaken for dwarf men. So that's from Lord of the Rings. Nowhere in Lord of the Rings does it mention dwarf women having beards. But
I think
what do you think?
by omission and saying they look so alike, it's not saying it.
You're right. It's open for interpretation.
No, it's not. That's pretty clearly they have beards.
You think by what I just read?
Yes.
It just says so like in appearance.
Yeah. And are not dwarves explained as appearing with large beards?
They are.
So extrapolate from there, friend.
It does not explicitly say. So one interpretation could look at that. I'm just saying, I think either interpretation of that text, if you interpret it to mean they have beards.
Deadliest words in the world, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Hit it.
Look, am I wrong?
Whoa.
You're
really pushing it.
If someone wanted to read that and say, it doesn't say they have beards, I'd be like, that's valid. And if someone wanted to say, well, so like an appearance, like you just said, well, all dwarf men have beards, right? But it never explicitly says in Lord of the Rings that they do. However, in the book War of the Jewels, which is sort of a companion piece to the Silmarillion of unpublished texts by Christopher assembled and did a great job annotating. It says this: for the Naugrim, which is the Elvish name for dwarves, for the Naugrim have beards from the beginning of their lives, male and female alike. Nor indeed can their womankind be discerned by those of other race, be it in feature or in gait or in voice, nor in any ways save this, that they go not to war and seldom save at direst need issue from their deep bowers and halls. So there you go. In an unpublished text, previously unpublished, that was sort of preliminary. This was told in the War of the Jewels and Morgoth's Ring. This was like Tolkien's kind of one of his second passes at the Silmarillion. So he says that. So he was working through that, and there he clearly says that they do, and that they have like similar voices even, and like they're so alike. So depending on which one you read, you could interpret it either way. So the fact that there are dwarf women who don't have beards is not, I think personally, contradictory to the canon. And canon is even a wishy-washy concept in Tolkien because he contradicts himself. So there you go. That's all I have to say on the dwarf women beard issue. And I think I remember reading somewhere that there was someone who confirmed like we might see like dwarf women, like some dwarf women with beards in the show, but Dees, like the one we see, doesn't have a beard. So like it's maybe some dwarf women have them, but they shave them. You know, like who knows?
Totally. That was the character Violet in Requiem. She decided to shave it and cast aside her typical dwarf upbringing, and so totally, I hear you. But it does sound like you're a dwarf beard apologist a little bit.
Well, and it could be support of the text in Lord of the Rings where it says, you know, that they can't be discerned. Maybe it's only when because there are so few dwarf women. And also, like dwarves don't marry much because they only ever fall in love with like one person, and some like that's it. And so, like marriage between dwarves is not common, and there are so few dwarf women that they're very protective of the women, and that's why their population hasn't expanded as much. So maybe when they do need to go out, it's a thing where, all right, let me grow the beard out. So we're like protecting the women by like hiding, right? But then when they're just like in the dwarven halls, they're like, no, we're going to shave. Like, who knows?
Seems like it'd be the opposite, but I hear you.
That they would shave when they go out?
I don't shave when I go outside. Or I don't shave when I stay indoors. You didn't know me quite well during the pandemic.
Yeah, but when you go out, are you trying to be like, I'm going to try and be hairy so that
No, I'm saying I'm going to shave.
Yeah, dwarf culture is the exact opposite.
Exactly. That's my only point. Well, I think that we did a pretty good deep dive into the rocky.
What is the thing that either surprised you the most or that you were like the most, I had no idea.
I think the thing that interested me the most, honestly, is how they came into being.
The origin story.
I think it just now it makes me really curious how we got hobbits and
Oh yeah, that's a whole thing.
all sorts of things. It's just kind of fun. I think that gives me a little bit more of an anchorage into the story, the world a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up this week's episode of Podcasts of the Rings. Next week, Alex, what can we expect from you?
I think we're going to continue to talk about some more elves. We have a lot of elves to cover. So we already talked about Galadriel. We talked about Elrond. So I think we're going to talk about Hold on, let me say this right. Gil-galad. Gilgamesh, yeah. Gil-galad, I think is how you pronounce it. I've always said it Gil-galad, and it's Gil-galad. I've been corrected. And please send your letters, any corrections.
And be nice if you're going to judge us, okay?
Please.
Constructive criticism.
Just be nice in general, even if you're not judging us. Please.
Well, don't be nice. Be kind.
There you go.
In general.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you again for your brilliance and insight into this world and ability to make it fun and easy to learn.
I am glad I succeeded at that.
You sure did. Until next time.
May our roads meet again.